Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad you're here with me this morning for the International Conference on the Desert. Um, Today, I'm going to start with an introductory talk so that the audience can get a sense of what the event is going to be like today, how it's going to be organized, and to kind of launch and give a context for all of you as presenters today. So I'll introduce myself first. My name's Natasha Beranek. I'm the editor of the Anthropology and Transhumanism series at Trivent Publishing, and I'm the event organizer for today's conference. Since receiving my doctorate in social anthropology from University College London in 2011, and receiving a postdoctoral Fulbright Fellowship in 2013. I've taught anthropology at several US colleges and universities. I've been a resident of California's high desert since 2022. And since then, I've brought the philosophical training that I received during my residency at the Transformations of the Human program in Berkeley, California, to several desert-themed creative and scholarly projects, as well as to my work as industry relations coordinator for the 2023 29 Palms Book Festival. I also am currently an online instructor for Sinclair Community College located in Dayton, Ohio. So some introductory remarks for the conference today. I'd like to extend a very good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are in the world, to all the contributors, scholars, and artists who are participating in today's symposium, titled The Desert, New Perspectives on Humans, Nature, and Technology. I'd also like to give a warm wishes to all those in the audience today who have taken an interest in the theme of today's conference, especially my fellow high desert community members who have been a source of advice, encouragement, and support as they've witnessed its evolution and development over the past 2 years. Hosted by Trivent Publishing, which is based in Budapest, Hungary, and organized by the editorial board of Trivent's book series, Studies in Anthropology and Transhumanist Philosophy, the fundamental purpose of today's inaugural gathering is to bring like-minded individuals together who are compelled to consider the power of the desert in an era of biotechnology, digital innovations, and machine intelligences. A primary focus of this conference proceeds from the following question. How are these exponential technological developments a flashpoint for progression into new modes of desert thinking? Well, anyone who is a desert dweller understands from experience the landscape's intensity, its heat, wind, sudden rains, flash floods, its resilient flora and fauna. The desert forces that are of primary interest today are its conceptual forces. Global deserts have existed anywhere from 10 to 60 million years, but as a Western idea, the desert has a much more abbreviated philosophical and literary history of around 200 years. It is notable, indeed highly telling, that such desert thinkers, heavy hitters of 19th and 20th century continental philosophy like Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, and John Baudrillard, are all united by their limited experience of the desert in a literal or physical sense. Primarily, they have been intrigued by the desert as a motif around which they could form commentaries on nihilism, capitalism, industrial technologies, and the modern and postmodern condition. For Nietzsche, the desert represented the spiritual wasteland of modernity, an image of our inability to move beyond the death of God and an exhausted metaphysical tradition. Heidegger saw the desert as symbolizing the final frontier of techno-scientific rationality as a dominant form of modern thinking. Baudrillard's desert was an instantiation of hyperreality, a postmodern condition in which we cannot see nature as it truly is and can only understand it through the cultural representations that we create. And what now, and then the decades to come, of the desert and its significance? We are presently in the midst of a paradigm shift moving swiftly from a humanistic and postmodern worldview into a transhuman and posthuman one. Everyday use of ChatGPT and Gemini is becoming so routinized that neo-Luddite perspectives on AI that were so recently mainstream are now being casually replaced by positive and hopeful sentiments about its place in our future fruition. Our relationship to non-human animals and technologies is being reframed. No longer can we take for granted that we are somehow more than nature and other than machines. Can we really still say with certainty that the heretofore defining characteristics of our species, language, creativity, and intelligence, are definitive? From within the widening fissures of this philosophical terrain, new desert meanings must rise to the surface. The contemporary philosopher Aidan Tynan observes that the desert is simultaneously a place of excess and lack, with these forces existing in a state of flow rather than opposition. If, as today's first keynote speaker, Professor Stefan Sorgner argues, the humanistic worldview has been founded upon dualism, for example, mind versus body, man versus woman, reason versus emotion, just to name a few, then in a post-human world, deserts as conceptual spaces are intrinsically pivot points around which many of these dualities may twist and be liberated. And in some sense, the desert, as a modern Western idea, must be reformulated or left behind. So on this note, I'd once again like to express my gratitude to our contributors and my excitement about learning about their research, spanning the disciplinary spectrum from literature and philosophy, art and music, to anthropology and geography. We have a truly international collection of scholars here today. Today's presentations will explore a broad range of topics, including indigenous ethnographic perspectives on the deserts in India and deserts in Australia, contemporary desert-themed music festivals and genres, pop culture representations of deserts in science fiction and comic books, the relationship between deserts and simulation theory, and original commentaries on 19th and 20th century desert thinkers. Today's program is organized into 4 sessions, each of which will conclude with a 10-minute wrap-up discussion, at which time we will look forward to answering questions from the audience through the live chat on Facebook. Please go ahead as audience members and send your questions in at any time during the session so that we have them prior to the Q&A at the end of each session. Our opening session, starting now, features 2 exemplary keynote speakers. The first, Stefan Sorgner, is a professor of philosophy at Cabot University in Rome. He is the author of multiple books, most recently, The Philosophy of Posthuman Art and We Have Always Been Cyborgs, Digital Data, Gene Technologies, and an Ethics of Transhumanism. As an authority on the ethics of emerging technologies, Professor Sorgner is highly sought after, both as a speaker at universities around the world and as a point of contact for journalists and media representatives. Following Stefan, we will be joined by Professor Kim Stringfellow, based in Joshua Tree, California. She is the director of the Mojave Project, which is a transmedia documentary and curatorial project exploring the physical, geological, and cultural landscape of the Mojave Desert. Initiated in 2014, it is an ongoing multi-year project that reconsiders interpretations of this unique and complex landscape. Professor Stringfellow is the author of several books, including Greetings from the Salton Sea, Folly and Intervention in the Southern California Landscape from 1905 to 2005, and Jackrabbit Homestead, Tracing the Small Tract Act in Southern California Landscape, 1938 to 2008. The title of the keynote speech that she will give today is The Mojave Desert as Creative Catalyst. And now for Stefan's speech, which is titled Different Castles Made of Sand, The Desert is Our Home. Thank you, Professor Sorgner. The floor is yours.
Many thanks for hosting that absolutely amazing conference. The topic is really well chosen. And yeah, many thanks also for the kind introduction. Yes, the desert is our home. And I will basically try to show in this presentation the interplay between perspectivism and an ontology of becoming as related to the desert, the theme of the desert, in an exemplary manner, how that basically related to my own development towards becoming a Euro-transhumanist. I grew up as a Catholic, which was key for my development as a thinker. At the same time, I excelled in the field of natural sciences, particularly mathematics. From an early age, I was preoccupied with death. What will happen after we die? Is there an afterlife, punishment, and rewards, or is life merely about our experiences in the empirical realm? These questions kept me up all night, fully occupying me. I began looking for answers in both religious and scientific texts. Both then and now, I decided that whatever system I would subscribe to, I would fully embrace. This attitude also defined my possible goals. As a Catholic, full dedication would mean to go so far as becoming the Pope. But at the same time, I began reading books about astrophysics. I reasoned that in order to understand what will happen after death, I had to first understand the origin of the universe. Reading these books puzzled me even further, as I couldn't reconcile the Catholic text with my books on physics. By chance, I read in my books on physics that the tricky issues could not be dealt with purely by science, but only by philosophy. I was intrigued. During a school trip to Hamburg at the age of 13, found a little book entitled On Nature by Heraclitus in a secondhand bookstore at the Reeperbahn, which was exactly what I was looking for. That was my first philosophical text I discovered. Again, fortunately, the book happened to be in addition with commentary by thinkers like Plato, Goethe, and Nietzsche. I had found my philosophical home. I couldn't put the book down, and I also began reading the text by the other thinkers mentioned in the book. Plato's Republic, Goethe's Faust, and Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and I loved them all. Basically, these are still sort of the books I can most relate to nowadays. Nietzsche was particularly intriguing to me. I began reading more of his writings. In 7 years, I had read all of his major texts. He became my philosophical educator. My regular intellectual exchanges with Nietzsche had consequences for my life and my future studies. Always excellent in mathematics, everyone thought I would choose that field of studies. During my civil service, I received prestigious offers for studying mathematics. However, I could not justify this life anymore. Everyone was shocked. Here my life was an intellectual desert, and I realized that my calling was philosophy. Life is so short, so painful, so puzzling. I realized that the best thing I could do would be to dedicate myself to making sense of it. Nietzsche's text spoke to me. I realized the importance of his three metamorphoses, the camel, the lion, and the child. I had come to Nietzsche via Heraclitus, and the metaphor of a child playing at the beach and building castles made of sand made sense to me. This also made me understand the Jimi Hendrix song, Castles Made of Sand, a song about a disillusioned romantic I can strongly relate to. I was a camel when I considered becoming the Pope. I was a lion when I read Nietzsche and freed myself from the paradigm of a life dedicated to a fulfilled afterlife. Then I became a child playing with sand, building castles made of sand. And that's still what I'm doing as a philosopher, building loads of castles made of sand. However, which castle do I want to construct? Which resonates my longings, drives, and needs? Which castle is worth constructing for me? How can I distinguish my core needs from those that have been created and imposed upon me by society? These are the challenging questions that continue to occupy me as a philosopher. I sighed, and that's where I stand as a European. I can't help it. God help me. Amen. The desert is growing. Woe to him who harbors deserts, unquote, Nietzsche. Nietzsche was aware of the growing desert of nihilism. He pled even with God, but his time as a camel had long passed. Yet he was clearly aware of the enormous woe of being stranded in a desert. All creations made of sand are contingent nodal points. It is challenging to find a stable ground in the sand. It can come into your eyes and blind you, which might make it impossible for you to find a way out. I embrace these challenges and am intimately occupied with them. At the age of 26, in the publication of my monograph, Metaphysics Without Truth, I addressed the desert around me by realizing and embracing nihilism, which already showed that interplay between perspectivalism leading to an ontology of becoming back to perspectivism. All perspectives are interpretation. This means that they can be wrong, but also that they do not have to be wrong. However, rightness and wrongness are not decisive criteria. Instead, what matters are the constructive interferences with one's core drives, needs, and longings. Epistemologically, there are no better or worse perspectives. However, with respect to one's drives, better or worse perspectives exist. Some resonate more strongly and positively than others. These insights led me to realize that I'm caught in a circle. All philosophical perspectives are interpretations. This also applies to perspectivism itself. However, criteria for better and worse and for decisions are needed for making decisions. Where do these criteria come from? They do not come from anywhere outside of yourself. Those criteria exist in your tribes. What is challenging is to distinguish one's core tribes from others which have been installed within you by external forces. Being able to distinguish between these two sources has kept me occupied from then on to find a way to deal with the deserts. It's not the desert which is the challenge. The desert is our home. What needs to be dealt with is the way we deal with the desert into which we're thrown. This has been another rather challenging issue, which has kept me occupied for many more years. Thus, I discovered transhumanism in 1999, became aware of the resonances with my own effective existence, but also realized that I cannot fully find myself in the dominant forms of transhumanism, as they do not constructively interfere with my cultural framing structured by Heraclitus, Goethe, and Nietzsche. This became my path to Eurotranshumanism. All norms and values are human-made fictions. We've created them, and we can change, alter, and adapt them. Which fictions do I subscribe to? I've always resisted totalitarian and paternalistic forces telling me how I ought to live and how I ought to structure the story of my life. I longed for, I needed to realize my story, as we all need to find our stories and create them. In this way, I realized the relevance of liberal autonomy for my own life. I want to autonomously decide how I want to live while being aware of my intricate entanglement, which renders the philosophical notion of autonomy utterly meaningless. I'm determined by my environment and by my parental genes. No decision can be taken independently of them. However, what can be done is to make a decision by taking more core elements of my existence into consideration and to fade out influences which have been implemented upon me from violent sources. Mindfulness is needed to do so. A close analysis of whatever steers me and moves me and makes my life meaningful. It clearly is not an easy endeavor. Mindfulness meditations help to distinguish one's core drives from violent impositions. During such meditations, it was also necessary to embrace truthfulness, as sometimes drives have showed up of which one can be embarrassed, ashamed, and afraid. A lot of strength is needed to be truthful to oneself and accept that certain special drives are core to one's own existence, even though they are not essential cores, they are contingent cores, they're more central. In this way, it can be possible to at least become aware of some elements of our core drives. However, it doesn't yet guarantee that one acts upon them, as our wills can often be rather weak, and an enormous amount of strength and in particular self-control is needed to act in accordance with one's core needs. In particular, if they do not correspond to social expectations or they go against the values upheld by one's upbringing. However, by means of such reflections, I realized that these three virtues are central for autonomy: mindfulness, truthfulness, and self-control. And these virtues are necessary, but by far not sufficient for living a fulfilled life. Yet they're extremely helpful. The next steps concerning the reflections of our actual mindfulness meditations. What do you want? What do you long for? What are your special needs? I reflected on them intensely. Do I want to get my kicks right here and right now? Intense pleasures without any boundaries? Do I long for a regular job and a common sense life with a family comfort and security? Is it in my interest to maximize my financial standing so that I can afford the pleasures I desire most? Should I target political or religious institutional power to actually be able to structure the environment according to my demands? Is the highest level of fulfillment to be realized with artistic creativity? A life dedicated to forming new, moving, and meaningful structures. These are plausible narratives. Why any of the lifestyles mentioned here might be a convincing answer to my question. However, I realized that other elements are even more important for my own drives. What I am presenting is merely an analysis of these core drives, and they might be plausible for everyone or no one besides me. However, they clearly are meaningful for me. A naive hedonism is clearly not in my interest, as I realize the need of self-care. And be it only for the sake of health, as being healthy clearly was a central element of my well-being. Living a hedonist life would undermine this central goal of mine. What about the goal of a regular job to care for one's family? I had already abandoned this during my teenage years when I decided not to study mathematics, but decided to study philosophy. What is more dangerous for one's own stable existence than studying an activity which primarily has a value for the one who's occupied with it? Who gives you money to reflect on the good life? Seeking money for the sake of maximizing financial standing was never my interest. I was aware that a certain financial standing is needed for living well. Luckily, I've always managed to secure this so far. However, money is merely a means, as Aristotle already mentioned. Working for the sake of money means that you're a slave. You strive for a means to get more of a further means. I was interested in what makes life intrinsically valuable, not interested in means for further means. What about political and religious power? Yes, these options for structural reality can be enormously seductive. However, it was not my interest to be part of an institution. I cherished my life of seclusion dedicated to reflecting on philosophical issues. I abhor the distractions of any type of institutional structure. The issue of creating new artistic structures, on the other hand, has been enormously tempting. And this is what I practice as a philosopher too. However, I'm aware that I don't have the necessary artistic or musical skills to live a life dedicated to the arts. Hence, another option had to be realized. Intense stage of pleasure pains are meaningful, but realizing through a life dedicated to a naive hedonism cannot properly generate these special states. In addition, it undermines the aspect of health and self-care, which I cherish enormously. Hence, a refined hedonism was what I realized as central for my way of life. Not mindless indulgences were central, but exquisite pleasure pains, which can be lived within confinement of rock-solid bounds shared with people who have been through the trenches with you. These are the circumstances for generating peak moments of exquisite pleasure pains. Such a peak moment is extremely rare and utterly meaningful. Several strong capacities, intriguing prerequisites, and special virtues are needed to be able to have such peak moments of overflowing fulfillment. And these are grandezza, raffinatezza, and fiducia. Grandezza stands for all kinds of strengths. Whatever you focus on, you need to be excellent, dedicated, and hardworking. Do not be mediocre. Do not take things lightly. Do take care of all the details. This is what matters. The details you bring in also have to do with raffinatezza. You become aware and structure your refined taste, which corresponds to your core of affects. These types of refinement come out in all aspects of your thinking, acting, and creating. You have special choices, longings, and needs. When you sit with a friend at a fireplace in Seals Maria, you drink your Octomore whiskey from a large whiskey glass from Moser with a 24K gold decoration. Last but not least, the issue of fiducia. You need strongly resonating others for experiencing overflowingly exciting pleasure pains. To be able to freely let go of your worries, openly reveal your core drives, and truthfully share them with someone else. A special fiducia is needed, a rock-solid bond, which you only manage to experience with people who've been through the trenches with you. Being able to experience such peak moments of exquisite pleasure pains is enormously rare. An intriguing, intimate, and intense entanglement of enormously refined and mutually resonating special needs is amazingly beautiful. However, such a peak moment which can justify an entire existence, which enables the experience of an utterly overflowing fulfillment, and which can give meaning to life, can be lived. This is similar to the peak moments in the eternal recurrence Nietzsche talks about. Whether this description of a castle made of sand constructively interferes with anyone besides me is an open question. However, grandezza, raffinatezza, and fiducia, and your transhumanism are my contingent responses to the challenging life in the desert. Many thanks. for your attention.
Thank you, Stefan. That was a wonderful talk. And you did, I really appreciate how you took Nietzsche's metaphor of the desert and related it not only to your own personal journey, but also to the ethics of transhumanism that you've developed as a scholar. So many thanks to you. I will go ahead and move on to our next keynote speaker. This Kim Stringfellow. I introduced Professor Stringfellow earlier, but I'll just briefly repeat. She's an artist, educator, writer, and independent curator based in Joshua Tree, and she's the director of the Mojave Project, which is a transmedia documentary and curatorial project exploring the physical, geological, and cultural landscape of the Mojave Desert. Her presentation title today is The Mojave Desert as Creative Catalyst. Welcome, Kim Stringfellow, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning from Joshua Tree, California. I'm in the location where Natasha is, and it is nearly 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It's going to take just a second to get it set up, so hold on. Okay, and then this is a little... Now let me just share it again to get the right screen so you're not seeing my notes. Okay, so you should just be seeing the screen and not the notes, correct, Natasha?
Yes, it's the
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I am a artist, photographer. I'm a professor at San Diego State University. I teach in the art department in the design area, and I've been documenting arid desert regions of the American Southwest since the late 1990s. And as Natasha mentioned, my first book, my thesis for my Master of Fine Arts was actually Greetings from the Salton Sea. And I moved on to a project that documented small tracts that are resulted in little cabins that are sprinkled across the Morongo Basin area where we live and throughout Southern California and Arizona, Nevada, and other states, called Jackrabbit Homestead. This is an extension of this work that I've done in the American Southwest. And the Mojave Project is a much larger transmedia documentary that's distributed to my audience for free. It is organized in dispatches that I've been releasing through the website mojaveproject.org since late 2014. And now there's over 45 dispatches. Some of these are up to 8,000 words, so they're deeply researched. They take a lot of time. Also, just to give you a context of the scale of the Mojave Desert, it's actually located in 4 states: California, Nevada, a little bit of Arizona, and Utah. So it's an extensive area to document, and there is lots of things that are going on at any time. So the focus of the project is to look at the physical, the cultural, and the geological landscape, and where all of these themes collide. And I would just like to say geology is actually my weakest point. So I search out researchers and people in the field to discuss that. And I also have contributors that are experts on certain themes, like we did a dispatch on climbing culture in Joshua Tree that was actually done by a climber. I've worked with a geologist. I've worked with people that have written about cinema in the Mojave Desert. And today what I would like to do is just kind of go over some of the ways that the desert has been used to project a lot of our desires and upon it, especially the Mojave Desert in particular, not deserts worldwide. It's a very iconic desert, and it has really been kind of crafted for us the way we learn about it, say through fiction and cinema. And a lot of this is this kind of fictionalized space, and it's not necessarily what is actually at play at any given time within this geographical space. So I'm just going through a few slides just to give you an idea. These are from the homepage of mojaveproject.org for you to see. This is the project themes that I cover in this project. So, the main themes are desert as wasteland, geological time versus human time, sacrifice and exploitation, desert as staging ground, space and perception, danger and consequence, movement and mobility, transformation and reinvention. And this gives you an idea of, these are field dispatches that you can peruse. You can also look at them, in various themes that you can pull up. Okay, so just to begin, I wanted to start with the first dispatch that I published, which was a dispatch on Reyner Banham. Reyner Banham is an architectural critic that I'm sure you are familiar with. He spent a considerable amount of time in Southern California, specifically in Los Angeles. And as a scholar and critic, he was very accessible for the general public. And so there is a lot of films that, he talked about the nature of Los Angeles, celebrating Los Angeles, but he was also one that really fell in love with the Mojave Desert and was looking at it as this kind of blank slate for projecting cultural fantasies. I think this is a really great quote from Scenes in American Deserta, which came out in 1982. And I want to just kind of go further into this idea of how the endless vistas, the connection to the cosmos, and unfamiliar plant and animal life, which until recently, the lack of urban settlement has given the illusion that the desert is empty, which it is not. It is a very rich ecosystem. It's a very rich cultural place that has indigenous cultures, many indigenous cultures that have existed and thrived here since time immemorial. Because it is perceived as a place that is empty, this makes it an excellent place for extraction of natural resources, location of military installations, and weaponry testing, and also extraterrestrial visitation, if you so believe in this. So this is actually Reyner Banham. He was an avid cyclist. This is him cycling on Silurian Dry Lake, which is near Baker, California, which is very close to the center of the Mojave Desert geographically. This is a photograph by Tim Street Porter that some of you may know. He's known for his architectural photography in Southern California. One of the first people to celebrate the Mojave Desert early on is the writer John C. Van Dyke, who is also an art historian. He was, teaching back east. He had a brother that had a ranch outside of Daggett near Barstow, California. There was a lot of luminaries that visited the Daggett Ranch, including John Muir. He actually had a daughter who had consumption, and she was spending time, out in the desert to recover, from respiratory issues and things like that. So I found that really interesting that Muir was out of his element, out of the Eastern Sierras, or the Sierras in general. He, has started this idea of looking at the desert as something to value. And so before Van Dyke, you had the Jayhawkers, you had these people that were crossing over to get to the gold fields and things like that. This was a hindrance for people to actually cross. And so it was seen as a very violent place. This was a place that, definitely without guidance, you could die within a matter of hours, depending on the heat and lack of water. And as, part of the leisure class, a scholar, he was able to have the money to be able to go out and start to poke around. And he created this kind of fictionalized account of him. You can see this in this slide where I went alone in the desert with only a fox terrier and a buckskin pony for company. There was no one on the edge who knew about the interior, and those who talked as though they knew did not care to go with me. I was promised plenty of trouble. So he wrote this beautiful book called The Desert in 1901 that has been popular ever since. And on the right-hand side is just a wonderful quote by Van Dyke. It is so interesting to me because he also, there's speculation that Van Dyke actually did not explore the desert, solitary, except for his fox terrier and his pony, that most of his observations of the desert were either at his brother's ranch in Daggett, or as he was crossing the desert region via train. So a lot of this is his projections, his romantic projections on the desert, on the Mojave Desert, but they were so well written that it's hard to tell the fiction from the truth. And I would argue to say that the benefits of him having the public getting their attention through this publication to appreciate the nuances of the desert ecology, of the vast scale and beauty, is invaluable. And so regardless of whether he actually did this or not, I don't think is so important. But he's really kind of the basis of people being able to start to think about deserts in a less hostile way. Once air conditioning became available after the World War II, you had off-road vehicles such as Jeeps available to be able to explore. I mean, of course, there were people that were out and about exploring the desert region, but it really didn't occur until after the post-war period and into the time where people were starting to get these jackrabbit homesteads and things like that too. So, it's also been this place, there's lots of projections of what is going on here. This is me in Rachel, Nevada, which is in a transition zone between the Mojave Desert and the Great Basin Deserts, which is just on the border of the Nevada National Security Site, which is the Nevada test site. This is a place where UFO fanatics congregate and communed, with extraterrestrials and speculate about the goings on in Area 51. And I just wanted to say that I think the military has encouraged this, over, more than 70, 75 years, these conspiracy theories, because it really keeps the public from learning what they're really up to. And so I've, read some things, Trevor Paglen, who has done extensive work out here, he's alluded to that as well. Kind of moving forward with extraterrestrials and, this fixation on the desert as this place to commune with people, or, beings outside of human contact. Giant Rock is a very mythic place which is in the Morongo Basin, that is not too far from Joshua Tree. It is one of the largest freestanding boulders in the United States. And very mysteriously, it cleaved. You can see this in 2000 at the millennium. A lot of people speculated all sorts of things because of that particular arbitrary date for those of us who are atheists. But I still find it very fascinating that it occurred on that day. So it is a place where people off-road, they party. People speculate that the boulder cleaved because people would have large bonfires underneath, and that caused, some tension between the rock, and that's when it has such a fascinating history because in this particular area, this is where George Van Tassel actually, he came here later after a gentleman earlier had built a home underneath this boulder, believe it or not. It's now completely filled up. Kritzer actually mysteriously met his fate when some dynamite exploded when some sheriffs came to check in on him. People in the area in the 1940s thought he had been perhaps a spy for the Germans, which proved to be untrue. So this particular site is very, very fascinating, and lots of projections of things that have gone on there. This is George Van Tassel. George Van Tassel actually, him and his family had a UFO convention, which I've written about in the Field Dispatches. And at Giant Rock, that is where the UFO conference took place from the 1950s into the very late 1960s. And it was very well attended. It kind of a wonderful gathering. And of course, Van Tassel, like several people of his time, they wrote about their visitations from outer space of extraterrestrials. And he has many texts and things that he wrote. He later went on to fund what is called the Integratron, which is the structure you see behind him. This is architecturally a fascinating building. It has perfect acoustics. This is where it's a very popular place to partake in a sound bath now. And you can sign up for this when you come out to visit. But this is a very charged history of the place. And I'm probably not going to be able to get through all of my slides here, but I'm going to kind of move a little quickly because it looks like I have about 3 minutes to go, I believe. Culturally, musicians, this has been also a magnet for music culture. And I found this when I was putting together the slideshow. And this is the Joshua Tree album by U2. A lot of people think that the Joshua Tree was actually in the Morongo Basin in Joshua Tree, the town of Joshua Tree. It's actually a Joshua Tree that was in northern Mojave Desert in the Ridgecrest area. And so this is the actual tree that appeared behind them that Anton Corbin photographed for the record, and it has since fallen, but has become this place for people to, visit, commemorate, and so forth. Of course, a lot of people have heard about Graham Parsons, who actually met his death when he OD'd in the Joshua Tree Motel. The musician Donovan and his wife Linda, they lived and raised their children in Joshua Tree. The Queens of the Stone Age and many other musicians have found inspiration out here. Mojave Desert is also a place for nefarious activities. I wrote about violence in public lands. Most of the Mojave Desert is federally owned, and it is either national parks, national monuments, Bureau of Land Management, but a quarter of the Mojave Desert is actually military installations. And this is actually a shot from Shot Grable, which was a 15-ton gun-type missile weapon shot on May 25th, 1953 in the Nevada test site. So there were hundreds of above-ground tests that were eventually stopped, but this is a heavily contaminated part of the Mojave Desert north of Las Vegas. This is another area that is north of where that shot was. This is Nellis. This is a place where I was told that a secretive plutonium dispersal test site occurred here, and this is just right at the border of that. I'm just going to play just a snippet of this. This was the inspiration for the Holes in the Desert Dispatch, where I talk about violent and nefarious activities throughout the Mojave Desert. So I'm just going to play just a little snippet.
Meeting in the middle of the desert always made me nervous. It's a scary place. I knew about the holes in the desert, of course, and everywhere I looked, there could have been a hole. Normally, my prospects of coming back alive from a meeting with Nikki were 99 out of 100.
Okay, so I'm not able to actually finish one, but it's actually up on the website if you want to take a look at that. But I think it's just a great depiction of how many people unfamiliar with desert regions, how they feel about their physicality when they are in these types of areas. I'm just going to leave you with just a snippet of Mojave Fallout Las Vegas. This is a super popular video game, and I just got a kick out of this song and all these strange depictions for this. Caught off guard and left for dead. Luck keeps turning as the light begins to dawn. And by healing hands I'm safe, pulled from my shallow grave. I can feel reprisal echoing through my skull. Set my sights on shining spires, set out on the highways tired, on the desert sands and ruined roads I roam. Okay, and so if you'd like to visit the project, I encourage you to do so, mojaveproject.org. And yeah, I think that, Natasha, I'm within my 20-minute slot. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I really enjoyed the opportunity to once again learn more about the kinds of themes that are part of the Mojave Project, and that you were able to share them with us today. Yeah, I had just one quick follow-up question. The clip that you played at the end, where is that from?
So that's a video, I'm calling it a video game, an online game, the Fallout series, so Fallout Las Vegas. And so I'm not sure, I don't play any online games, but I'm not sure if this is a fan that did this song to go with clips from it. but
Mhm.
I've always been intrigued with it because in the very first slide that I showed you when I opened, that's Primm, Nevada, which is on the border of Nevada and California. This is the major highway, Interstate 15, that you cross over. And as soon as you cross over into Nevada, there's a giant casino complex. So that is where they situated this fallout. And this is all these dry lakes and playas. You have a giant solar installation, very controversial solar installation with the big death ray towers of, this is one of the ones where the solar is reflected to the tower to create steam to generate electricity. And so that is a very interesting area of the Mojave Desert where that takes place. But, again, this is just used as this kind of blank slate to project our various fantasies.
Mm. Yes. So what I propose, because we are ahead of schedule by a few minutes, I'm looking at the live stream and I don't see any questions that have been posed by anyone who's watching it. So what I propose is that we can open up a discussion here amongst ourselves for the next few minutes. And then we can take a break and resume with the second panel at the time that's included in the official program, which is 10:25.
Great.
So yeah, I'll start with one observation, I guess is the best way to put it. The book that you mentioned, The Desert, which is written by Van Dyke. Did you say his first name is John?
Yeah, John C.
John
Van.
John C. Van Dyke. That you mentioned that he was kind of one of the first to see the desert as something to value rather than as an obstacle to
Yes.
their goal. Like, and for example, gold, or it could be something else. It just made me realize how much my perspective has been framed by not only living here, but also working in part in an industry that's very strongly influenced by seasonal tourism here, because most of the people that I'm coming into contact with are tourists who are intrinsically coming in here either sometimes with a certain level of ignorance about what their experience will be here, what they'll find here in terms of cultural things to do besides going to Joshua Tree National Park. But also, I mean, generally people who I encounter who are visiting here already see something of value in the landscape and the location. So it just was, you mentioning that was a time of me reflecting on how, the bias that I've already developed living here in terms of it, for me, like it doesn't, I still, people be like, well, there's nothing to do here. Like, this just kind of seems like a boring place. And I especially get that perspective when I talk to people I work with who grew up here often. But yeah, just how, relatively recently, there's been a shift towards it being a sought after destination and place to experience.
Yeah, I mean, it for Euro Americans and others, not indigenous people who have occupied this place, it has really been recently that we've been able, large populations have been able to come out to actually thrive here. Like I said, that was dependent on cooling, air conditioning and conveniences that we have, transportation, things like that. So, for the most part, this is still, one of the most largest areas in the United States that is still has a lot of intact wilderness areas, which of course are being threatened by industrial, green energy developments, industrial solar and wind, and so forth. That is something that I'm working on right now. Extraction has always been an issue here. So other than a lot of, the military training, extraction industries, for a long time, probably up until like the late 1940s, it was a place which was largely underpopulated, including, the Las Vegas region, which is the largest urban, center in the Mojave Desert.
Yes. And I'm glad that you mentioned air conditioning as well, because once again, like, it doesn't take very much to all of a sudden realize, oh my goodness, I don't know how people survived here before air conditioning. The technology certainly makes our ability to live here doable, but when it fails, it also quickly makes obvious how much one could argue that, I mean, it's a difficult place to be.
Yeah, but remember, humans have lived in desert regions throughout history, and we've been able to live very well in these areas. So there's actually in Hesperia, Cal Earth is a place where they do these rammed earth buildings based on an Iranian architect and designer, and they've done these structures all over the world. And this is based on technology that they had, hundreds, thousands of years ago. We've always had this. It's just that, we have become soft, where we don't want to live with nature. We want to, conquer nature. And so, now we have, cities like Phoenix that by 2060, they're going to have over 100 days, over 100 degrees. They're going to be unlivable, basically, because we just don't have the resources to support these types of very artificial living environments.
Yes, excellent point. I fully admit I fall in the soft category. Okay, so I'd like to go ahead and open the conversation to all of you. Any comments, questions? You can go ahead.
Yeah, to see the desert as a livable space, that's something. If we identify the desert with sort of nihilism, as that's been done in Nietzsche's philosophy, that's been for a long period of time, that's been seen as something hostile. The desert has been seen as the enemy. Even Nietzsche was trying to there's a need to overcome nihilism. We cannot live, we cannot survive the understanding of the permanent contingency of everything. Some new structures are needed. In Heidegger, a new God is needed. Only God can save us. So it is always some more stability is needed to actually be to actually have the right kind of cultural framing in order to survive. And here, what I was also trying to do was to show, no, it is. That's our home. These are the surroundings. Once we reflect upon, we live in and living in, and what are some of the challenges to live in utter contingent environment, that all the castles, everything we construct is made of sand, everything, and that applies to cultural constructs, that applies to values, to norms, to connections, to human connections. Everything is in permanent. There's a permanent ontology of becoming, and that's something which has been not many have sort of dared to embrace the nihilism. But I think actually it's a gain. It's also realizing the contingency has to do, so realizing the norms you yourself subscribe to has a lot of advantages. It's non-violent when you encounter others, so it avoids neo-colonial implications. So when you talk about human rights to countries, members of countries in which they are not being affirmed, it means it's not this neo-colonialism that you impose something which you regard as universally valid, but you realize the contingency of your own self-understanding, and that's an enormous achievement. So to embrace the desert, to embrace nihilism.
Yes, thank you. Nilanyana, you have your hand raised.
Yes. Thank you for that excellent, both of the presentations. I have a quick question for Kim. I was wondering whether the Mojave Desert is differently treated in terms of imagination from the other adjacent deserts that are that you find nearby. I'm not very aware of the diversity in terms of these regions because I'm from India.
Yeah, I mean, well, close to us in the Palm Springs area, you may have heard of.
I would love to know what are the differences which you bring into bring kind of
So I was just going to say that I'm really on the edge of two deserts. So the Colorado Desert is part of the Sonoran Desert, which spans into northern Mexico. And that is a different ecosystem. So when you're in Joshua Tree National Park, you're in the southernmost point of the Mojave Desert, and then you go down 3,000 feet into the Colorado Desert. And so this is where Coachella Valley, where the Coachella Music Festival, there is a very, exclusive, lots of money in that area. And then south of that is the Salton Sea. The reason I think with the Mojave Desert is the proximity to Los Angeles, to Hollywood. So it has been used as a set. It's used as a place to stage commercials, art interventions. Land artists used it as a staging ground. So it has the implications of this kind of culture that's been imprinted on it. And so I think it has become this very iconic desert because of its proximity to Hollywood. It's been used as a backstage lot, for many, many, and actually Jeffrey Burbank did this wonderful dispatch on cinema in the Mojave Desert. And we start with the von Stroheim, the 1924 silent film Greed, which was filmed in Gold Country in the Sierras. And then the final scenes take place in Death Valley. So, lots of that, and then he goes on into Star Wars and, many other films. So. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I just realized that. Are there anyone else? I was going to mention, I don't know, Kim, how you feel about this framing, but I've really started to think of the high desert as greater Los Angeles in a sense, particularly understanding that in terms of the more recent pandemic years, kind of migration of a lot of people from Los Angeles to the area. I don't know if you'd like to speak to that. I think locally, the understanding of, I guess you could say, residents of LA relocating either permanently, part-time, or actually not relocating, but buying property in the desert and then renting it out. I think there are mixed feelings that I've observed as a newer resident here. There's kind of a, I think maybe unconflicted sense of, on the one hand, it brings a lot of business and tourism to the area, which is good. On the other hand, there are effects for long-term local residents economically in terms of rentals that are available, that are affordable, as well as, I would say, like, there are some other impacts, but yeah, like if you think of the framing of LA versus the Mojave Desert versus one where they're more part of one whole, like how you think about that yourself.
Well, let me contextualize for the audience. First of all, we're talking about an area, it's the Morongo Basin, where Joshua Tree is located in Joshua Tree National Park, which is approximately about 2 hours directly east of Los Angeles on the coast. So it is fairly accessible to drive out to this area and became very popular during the pandemic as, any places that people could kind of escape and, be able to be in open space. So that was part of it. We've been inundated with Airbnbs, which throughout the world, I think this has been an experience. But I think there's also something interesting about our particular area. It's because we're also close to the Palm Springs, Coachella Valley, which is kind of a major not metropolitan, but ex-urban type of center. It's interesting. I have a friend that is from the Western Mojave Desert, which is part of Los Angeles County. So a lot of people don't know this, but Los Angeles County spans the mountains into the Mojave Desert in the Antelope Valley, which is Palmdale, Lancaster, which are the kind of the major metropolitan areas on the very far west Mojave Desert. And so he lived in that area, and he said, to me once, he said, I don't live in the sexy desert. You live in the sexy desert, because it's been projected through culture, through music, YouTube, films and all these things, that this is the special place. There's many special places in the Mojave Desert. They look nearly identical in some cases, but for whatever reason, people have projected this place to be that sexy desert that they want to be part of. It's far closer for someone in Los Angeles to go to Lancaster, Palmdale, Pear Blossom, where actually there's a wonderful dispatch on a socialist community commune at the turn of the century called Llano. And if you'd like to read about that in the area that I'm talking about. So I find it interesting how some places, thrive and become more popular, where other ones like Barstow and places seem to just be shrinking, in terms of culture and that. So.
The fact that you mentioned Lancaster and Antelope Valley, someone will need to fact check me, but I'm pretty sure, I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit, I only in the past few months watched Terminator 2 for the first time. And it's one of those movies I missed when I was growing up, but I believe that one of the scenes, it was filmed in Lancaster, where I can't remember the main character's name. Is it Sarah? But she goes out to the desert. She goes out to the desert with her son and to get weapons. And there's kind of this community off the grid, and they have all these weapons hidden in a space, and I guess I could say in their compound. So I think where some of these locations are used in popular culture, I think a lot of them do kind of resemble each other, but are lesser known to people outside of the area than, the name recognition of Joshua Tree.
Am I muted? Oh, okay. I'm putting in the chat just for people interested. This is a specific about Antelope Valley area and development there. And it coincides with a disease that is prevalent in the desert environments throughout the Southwest called valley fever. And this is talking about an intersection of industrial renewables, making dust that makes this disease more prevalent. And as a particular place, Lancaster, Palmdale is a place where people of color can afford to buy homes. And so a lot of people commute back and forth. So I wanted to, if you want a better picture of this place, there's a dispatch that I've listed in here. So.
Thank you.
And another one that may be of interest too, I'll put in here too. That's just north of Antelope Valley. I don't want to monopolize the conversations.
Not at all. I'm going to also share those links with the chat and the Facebook live stream so the audience can follow them if they like. So well, we are almost at the end of the first session. So thank you so much once again, Stefan and Kim, for your excellent keynote talks. And I am really happy that you were part of this event and launching it for the rest of the day and bringing your expertise in different areas, philosophy and arts and a transmedia exploration of the desert to the conversation that we're going to have today. Okay, so we will resume with session 2 at 10:25, when we will start with a presentation by Anna Markopoulou and then Evie Sambanico. Okay, thank you. See you in a little bit.